Hi, classes, welcome back. If you look at the board notes, this is a new program I'm trying to use just to kind of go through what we've done on the board. And so I'm sorry if it's a little clunky tonight. It's the first time I've used this particular program, but hopefully it'll get a little better as I go. But anyway, if you look back on October 30th, Wednesday, the day before Halloween, we were going through some of the things about a cell membrane. When you look at a cell membrane right here, that was when we talked a little bit about, and again, I'm drawing off to the side here, a lipid bilayer. Now, way back in class, I'd say about a month ago, we had a glass of water and we dropped into it as we were doing a little experiment in class. Let me see if I choose a different color here. A little bit of oil. And again, forgive the clunkiness, but I'm just going through what we did in class. And we noticed that the oil kind of clumped together a little bit, and also it tended to float at the top of the water. So this told us a couple of things. One, it would give us a good chance to review that density equals mass over volume formula, so the good old DMV. And also, it showed us that the lipids, and I'm going to write this word here, lipids, and I'm going to put underneath it the word fats, one of the three main biological molecules that we've talked about so far. We saw that the lipids tended to clump together. And let me use a different color highlighter here. If you look at the lipid bilayer, it's just a kind of a fancy way of saying like a fat double layer. And I'm going to choose another pen right here. You've got one layer and then another layer. And when you're looking at this fat bilayer, you're looking at a place that has a nice little protected envelope, and inside the envelope, you've got the possibility of chemical reactions that can be protected from the outside environment. This is very, very important. As we are starting to learn about the way a cell is put together, you've got these little proteins right here at the surface of the bilayer, right here that go between the bilayer, and they allow things into and out of the cell. And sometimes, again, let me go back up here and choose a highlighter. Sometimes it requires energy right here to get things into and out of a cell. So let me read this for you right here. Active transport, that means getting things into and out of a cell. Active transport to get molecules into or out of a cell requires energy. So I'm going to double highlight that. What molecule provides this energy? And again, when we were watching the Tim and Moby, the big answer to that was ATP. Now, right now, I'm just asking you to remember the letters ATP. It stands for adenosine triphosphate. But again, for now, we're just asking you to remember the letters. We'll get into a little bit more detail later about how the triphosphate, the three phosphate groups, the little molecules that are kind of stacked together as they break apart, release energy so the cell can do its thing. As we move on down, we're going to check out some of the big inventions along the way to understanding the cells we do nowadays. The one most important thing, in my opinion, to check out here is this right here. If you look at Anton von Leeuwenhoek, he discovered both protozoa and bacteria. And when I say respectively, that means first it was protozoa and then it was bacteria. I'd like you to think about, or ask the class to think about, why do you think protozoa was discovered first and then bacteria? And hopefully, most of the class wrote down, protozoa are larger. They've got these organelles on the inside. They've got specific parts. Sometimes they have flagella that help them move around. If you check out, let me try a different color here just to point it out. Bacteria are much, much smaller. And not only are bacteria smaller, they don't have, and I'll try a highlighter here. Again, I'm getting used to this program. They don't have those organelles here, those little tiny organ-like structures on the inside that do anything. But if you look at bacteria, they're basically, for the most part, not completely. I'm going to color this in if I can. That should be a highlighter right there. Let me see if I can get it to work. There we go. Again, if you look at, and I'll try a writing instrument right here and try a blue color. I'm going to write bacteria. And if you look at bacteria, they are that means before, karyotic. Now, karyotic is, think of it for now as meaning before the nucleus. And why might von Leeuwenhoek have discovered bacteria before protists? Well, one, they're smaller, and two, when you look at the bacteria, they look just like little dots. They look like little circles. They're very difficult to distinguish any kind of structure on the inside. So that was the main takeaway from this one right here. So let me go back up here, and I'm going to go down one more slide. And this was our slide going back a day to October 29th, Tuesday. If you look at cellular respiration. Now, again, I'm going to pull up a highlighter right here. On cellular respiration, we often use the word respiration to think of breathing. In other words, you've got a person and they're taking in air. Now remember, we were talking about the atmospheric pressure. Really, when you think about breathing, you've got, let's draw a person here the best I can. And again, I'm using a stylus in a new program, so bear with me. You've got a person here. This is you after running the 1 mile race there. You've got the PE teacher saying, hey, we're going to do the mile today. You've got the pacer test going. And you're taking in air because when you open the mouth and you flex the diaphragm, you have air pressure pushing oxygen down into your lungs. When you're looking at this right here, we often think of respiration as just breathing. So I'm going to write the word right here, breathing. Not quite the same thing in terms of respiration. And so I'll go back here and use a highlighter. When you're looking at respiration, breathing is a mechanical process. So when I put those 3 dots on the board like that, that means to write down the answers that we've been going through in class. Breathing is mechanical. That means, again, let me write this right here. You've got a muscle that's contracting and is letting oxygen flow down into your lungs. So that's breathing. However, when we're talking about respiration, again, let me try a different color here just for a second. Respiration, make it bright green as I draw it right here. Respiration means what's going on inside an organelle. An organelle, of course, as you remember, are one of like the little organs. That's literally what it means, is little organ. And in what organelle does cellular respiration occur? Well, again, when you're looking at 1B right there, we're talking, I'm going to write it right here. Again, bear with me. I'm getting used to this program. But I forgot the O. Mitochondria. So we're traditionally used to hearing that mitochondria is the battery or the powerhouse of the cell. And this is why you hear that. This is where the ATPs are put together, and this is where the energy from the cell comes from. And so as we go back to our highlighter right here, we're checking out what is the name and function of the energy-packed molecule that results from cellular respiration. Hopefully, we went through it several times in class. We remember it's ATP, adenosine triphosphate. It's a molecule that essentially, for our purposes in this class, again, as you can imagine, it's chemistry. It gets a little more complicated as we go. But it's got these 3 phosphate groups that are attached to a larger molecule. We know that molecules are a bunch of atoms that are stuck together, usually with covalent bonds in biology, sometimes with ionic bonds. But as we break off one of these groups, we get energy from it. It's kind of like the cell battery. So I'm going to switch to the next slide right here. This right here was the picture I asked everyone to draw. And again, I'm just going to highlight a little bit. If you check out the charged battery that represents an ATP molecule, it's got, and again, I'm using my little drawing tool to show these 3 little phosphates that are attached on the side here, and they get snapped off. As it gets snapped off, they provide energy for the cell to do all the things that the cell needs to do. Remember, most of the cells are doing things like, let me make this a little bit smaller. Let's think about all the things that a cell needs to do. They need to make proteins. So if you're talking about making proteins, very, very often, a cell is taking, again, the factory analogy that we used in class. If a factory makes something, we do a little factory on the board, just like our little book did as well. It's a common analogy that you hear, but it's a good analogy because when you're talking about cells making proteins, they take things in, they take molecules in, they expel molecules and excrete waste, and at the end of the day, their organelles are making proteins, which are amino acids. So let me write that right here. And again, I'm getting used to this program, so excuse me if it's not too clear. This is the first time I've used it. But if you check out amino acids, there are the monomers, these single parts. And as we combine them together, we've got 20 amino acids that we're going to learn about. As they combine them together, they get together to make proteins. And when you're talking about proteins, you're saying, okay, amino acids right here, they're the monomers of the single parts. Proteins are the polymers. Now think about your math classes at polymers. If you're studying polygons, you're studying a many-sided figure. So again, I'm coloring this in right here, many sides. That one's got 4 sides to it. A polymer just means many parts. And when we're looking at cells, they're putting together monomers to make polymers for the most part. And as we look here, this was meant to show you, this is one of our coloring sheets. You know, I'm a big fan of the coloring sheets because they hopefully give us a really good idea of the way cells are put together. You've got right here a layer, and I'm coloring it in yellow, and another layer that I'm coloring in yellow of a lipid layer. Remember, lipid, it's not crazy about water. It stays away from water. And then let me choose a slightly different color. You've got a layer on the inside right here that does like water. And when you're looking at these layers, the way that they are put together, they basically make, and let me make this a little bit smaller. Oh. If you look at this right here, they make a little bit of a layer that is a lipid bilayer. And a lipid bilayer, so let me write that right here, bilayer, it's a fancy way of saying a fat double layer. And it allows a little bubble for life to happen on the inside. As a matter of fact, one of the basic ideas of cell theory is that you don't have life unless you have a cell. And then finally, the last thing that we went into, and let me get this a little bit bigger so we can see it, we're talking about waves. Now, this might seem a big jump from what we were talking about. Like, hey, weren't we just talking about cells? Yes, we were, but the reason that they throw in waves in this particular chapter is one of the things we talk about is electromagnetic waves, which is a fancy way of saying, let me use this just to really make it stand out, light. So electromagnetic waves are just light. And when we're talking mechanical waves, that comes into play later in the class. We're learning about them now. But the most important part is these electromagnetic waves for us right now, because this is the way that we have studied cells so far. We're using light and light microscopes to study the microscopic world of, so you see light microscopes and telescopes, of cells. Later on, just so you know, and I'll use a different color highlighter, we're going to talk a little bit about mechanical waves, particularly when we have our guest scientists come on by. We're going to talk about sound. We're going to talk a little bit about, I don't think I wrote it here, but about mechanical waves in terms of earthquakes. And that's going to be extraordinarily important when we talk about the kind of waves that we get around here when we have earthquakes, and how they're evidence of the way our planet is continually changing, especially when we talk about plate tectonics. So I just wanted to go over the notes with you, and those are the last couple of days of notes. Again, I know this first video that I've done using my iPad in this new program were a little bit clunky, but I just wanted to go through and show you what we've done in class over the last couple of days. Have a wonderful end of your weekend, and I will catch you in class later. Bye-bye.